About 3 years ago, I received a phone call from a guy who told me that he was writing a book. And the book was going to be about music scene in Albany over the last 50, 60 years. He was looking for the names of people who took part in it, bands, all that sort of stuff. And so we sat down and I gave him what information I had about my own music travels in Albany, and gave him as much help and as many names as I could. I sent him photographs, and then forgot about it. It appears that he rang a lot of people. He actually ended up speaking to over 160 people, and he found something like 560 bands, and he put this stuff into a book, which has only just now been released. So I thought, well, what I'll do, because and this is a one-time only publication, incidentally, he tells me there's no reprints and there's no second editions, and there's only been 740 copies made available to the public. So I thought, well, look, I'll sit down and I'll go back over my own music career and revisit it. So I thought, well, okay, here it is. So this is me. My journey started in Albany when I was 15 years of age. That wouldn't be right, 15 years of age. We had a band at school. Now, when I say we had a band at school, one of the teachers, Frank Lambert, had assembled a little trio, piano, sax and drums. Frank Lambert played the saxophone, and there was a lady called Darylyn Griffiths played the piano, and Roy Bracknell was the drummer. And I had thoughts, well, okay, when Darylyn leaves, I wouldn't mind taking the piano chair. So when the time came, spoke to Frank and Mr. Lambert, as he was, of course, and I was chucked into the seat. So that was the start of it. And we were playing old-time dance music, waltzes, barn dances, all that sort of stuff. Go forward about 12 months. There was a guy in town called Gilmore Grieg. Now, Gilmore was a drummer. He was a bit of a larrikin, was Gilmore, and always got himself into trouble one way or another, but he wasn't a bad person. It was just that he happened to be the one who got himself into strife all the time. And my dad was a policeman, and I'd been sort of warned off sort of mixing with these types of people. So imagine my surprise when down the driveway one day rolls Gilmore Grieg. Now, I was inside, Dad was downstairs. Apparently Gilmore rolled up and said to Dad, "Oh, look, is Laurie home? Can I have a chat with him?" So Dad called me down. He said, "Gilmore wants to have a chat with you." I said, "Righto, fair enough." And Gil offered me the job of piano player with a new trio that he was putting together. He said, the sax player is Bob Beach. I'll be playing drums. I'm looking for a piano player. You're an up-and-coming one and soon to be okay. And I said to him, "Yeah, well, I don't mind. I'd need to clear it with Dad first." Because I said, "I'm only 16. I don't have a driver's license." He says, "Right, I can get around that. There's no great problems there." To Dad's credit, he just sort of said to me, "Well, don't get in too deep with him, but look, I don't mind. Let's see how it goes." So that was my first professional band. And Gilmore and Bob and I, we did a few gigs, and then Gilmore drifted off. He played in rock bands, pop bands, the pipe band, the town band. He was playing everywhere. So it was a matter then of putting something together with another drummer. Well, drummers, there were quite a few of them around town at that time. And so I put a little trio together. We called it Keynotes. There was Bob and myself. And Bob was also freelancing around the place, as I was. Everybody was back in those days. And we got some backing from guys, Graham Martin, Graham McBeath, and Roy Bracknell was, again, from school days, was another who we called on. And with the three of us, until I left town when I was 20, because I was employed at that time, I got transferred to Northam. So up until that time, I was playing with these guys, and we would get various gigs around the place, playing this old-time dance music. There was a band in town called the Blue Stars, and there was Fred Young ran the band, and his son Grieg Young was in the band as well. His mum and his sister played, and then there was a group of, again, there was 2 or 3 or 4 of us piano players would sit in, and there was a roster of saxophone players as well, including people like Teba Mk. It was a good musical base for me to work from. So come 21, or 20 at least, when I turned 20, and I got shifted out from Albany to Northam, where nothing happened there, and then I went from Northam up to Morawa for 2.5 years, and apart from spending a bit of time jamming with a mate up there, who was a sax player, again, nothing was happening as far as a formal band was concerned, and then we went across to Geraldton for 3 months, and then back down to Katanning. In Katanning, there was a piano tuner. The guy's name was Lou Lupp, and he had a little trio that he played. Now, Lou played piano. He also played drums, and he got together with a local fella by the name of Terry Old, and was putting together a trio, and he said to me, "Hey, how would you like to play with us?" And he had a Farfisa organ, and I said, "Well, yeah, no, that's okay." And he said, "I'll supply the organ, you come along." And so we played as a trio. There was a time when we were playing at the local hotel, the Federal, I think it was, and Lou wasn't able to play the gig, and so we got Barry Page in to play drums with us. And that worked out all right. So there was now me, Terry, and Barry, but I was using Lou's organ. And so I had to talk to the publican and said to him, "Mate, if I go and buy myself an organ, spend the money, can you guarantee that we can work here every Friday night, for example?" "Yep, no problem." So he booked us in. We seemed to be relatively popular. So with Laurie, Terry, and Barry, Late and BA, the band La Teba was born. So that happened for a while and then Joe Duzak joined us. Joey was a bass player, and he joined us, and that went along until Terry left town. And at about that time, there was another group of guys around town called Free Taff, who had an organ player playing with them, and I don't know quite what happened there, but she left, and then these guys turned to me and said, "Laurie, will you come and play organ with us?" And I said, "Well, look, I've got my own band here. We've got things up and happening." And they said, "Well, that's fine." I said, "If we come, I want to keep the La Teba name." And I said, "Yeah, no, well, that's okay. We don't have a problem with that." So I thought, right, well, that's fair enough. So then I had to talk to Barry and Joe, and they said to me, "Look, hey, if it was us being offered the opportunity, we would take it. So do it. Go." And so La Teba Mark II, I suppose you could call that, was then born. There was Joe's older brother, Greg. There was Bill Page. There was Ian Hoagland was the drummer. Sue Anderson at the time was the singer. And we put the band together, and after a little while, Sue was replaced by Sue Downey. And on occasion, there was a guy came down to Katanning, I think he was with a stock company, Preston, came down, and his wife, Helene Johnson, was a nightclub singer. She had worked in cabaret and all that type of thing, and now she's in a little town in Katanning in Western Australia. So we would get her along and back her from time to time. She would come in and do a floor show type thing. So we learned a bit about big band music and all that type of thing playing with her. The band lasted for a number of years, and we played all over the south, all over the Great Southern. Basically, we would drive out to Lake Grace, we'd go down as far as Tamballup, further down to Cranbrook, we'd play Cajun up, and would go further north up towards Narrogin and that type of thing. But we would play at Collie, at the Collie Hotel, on a regular basis. And the Collie Hotel had a reputation where so many band people said, "Oh, you want to be careful of that place. It's as rough as guts." Well, we thought, right, we'll give it a fly and see what happens. We'd heard of bands having their tyres slashed and all sorts of things, and had a look. And what would normally happen is these bands they'd play the gig, but then they'd all sort of hang out together, and they were their own little entity, and that was it. Well, we had a different way of doing things. We would move into town, if we were doing a cabaret or whatever it is, and we'd set up and we'd start talking to some of the locals, and we'd strike up a friendship with one or two or three of them, and then come the night when we start playing, we'd pick on them all night long. And so the crowd got involved with that as well, and as a result, we became quite popular. The years rolled on, and I left the band. A little bit later, we put a band together which we called Instant Replay. Incidentally, we named the band after the song Instant Replay, but never played it. Never played that song. At Instant Replay, I got back in touch with Barry Page and Joe Duzak, who let me so graciously allowed me to go to La Teba back in those days. And I said to them, "Hey, how about we get back together again?" And they said, "Yep, that sounds fine." And then there was a young guitarist in town, keyboard player, Kingsley Day. Now, Kingsley tells me I gave him his first gig. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but Kingsley and I have been great friends ever since. But Kingsley came in, and Sue Downey, who had been playing with La Teba, her husband, Steve Downey, was a guy who had opera training and had a fabulous voice, an amazing voice. And he joined us. And he was also, he also had a stage presence about him as well. I mean, if he was doing a rock song or whatever it was, there was nothing to see Steve on the floor rolling around with a microphone. And I mean, rolling around on the floor. It was great. And we kept that together for probably about 12 months, something like that. About that time, I moved from Katanning to Narrogin, and then I didn't do much up there. My wife at the time was teaching, and we moved from there across to Mandurah to Perth. With the teaching situation, we had a house full of music all the time, and it was driving me nuts. I was working in a music shop all day long. All I heard was noise and music. When I got home, there was music and noise. And we had three girls. One played trumpet, one played flute, one played clarinet, and they all practiced at the same time, as the music room was employed with keyboard players. And it was driving me absolutely nuts. It really was. So we made a decision that I would get myself a hobby right away from music. And we sat down, and I figured out that if I played golf, it would probably cost me $50 a week to play golf. I had no intention of playing golf. It wasn't my thing at all. So I went out and I budgeted $50 a week, and I bought myself, yeah, you're right, you got it, a keyboard. So I sat down and did this for the hell of it. I advertised for a partner. And I had a few people come along, and what needed to be was that they needed to be able to play lead guitar, and they also needed to be able to sing, because I didn't rate myself as a singer. And we would use backing tracks, MIDI file backing tracks. So, interestingly enough, one of the guys that came along, and he said, no, he said, I don't play lead, but I sing. And anyway, it turned out that I thought, I don't know, I didn't want to be the guy playing all the lead stuff. Then a guy turned up at the door. He rang me, and I said, well, come around, have a run through, see how it goes. So I get a knock on the door. I open the door, and there's this guy standing there with a can of beer in his hand. Where my wife's car normally stood in the carport, she was out doing something somewhere, was this Mercedes-Benz. And this guy says, g'day. He says, I'm John Reid. I said, g'day, John. How you going, mate? So we had a bit of a quick chat, And he said, look, he's got all the gear in the car. I said, right, well, let's bring it out. Now, you've seen those movies of the Beatles where they're going in one door and out the other, and it's an endless procession between the two. That's what it was like getting this gear out of this car. There was a PA system, there was an amplifier, there was this, there was that, there was everything else. We got it all inside, set it all up. But righto, what are we going to play? John says, righto, he says, turns around to pick up his guitar. He says, oh, bloody hell, he said, well, words to that effect. I think it started with either an F or an S, I can't remember. And he said, I've got my bloody guitar home. I thought, oh, no. He said, look, he won't take me long. He said, I'm only about 15 minutes away or something like that. So he jumped in the car and took off and came back with the guitar, and we sat down. And anyway, we had a jam session that we decided we would, yep, no, it all works well. We'll put it together. As it turned out, John had a great voice. He also didn't play bad guitar either. And many years before, he and his sister had been a duo, and they were called the Same Day Twins. And they had played all over Australia, here, there and everywhere, one way or another. And so John and I, we got on and we worked under the name Albatross. And we were together for a few years again, playing the sequence stuff. Then came the time when, again, I left the duo, and a mate of mine that was coming into the shop where I worked had played music, and he was looking for a little sequencer type thing. And as it turned out, I was talking to him about this, and we said, would you be interested in putting a band together? He said, no. He said, I don't think so. He said, I've done all that. He said, I really don't want to. And I said, well, it's up to you. I said, but I'd be quite happy to do it. You're a sax player, and I'd love to work with a sax player again. I haven't done it for a few years. And so that was what we did. We put this thing together, and we tried 2 or 3 different singers, and one of the ones that came in and worked with us for a couple of months was a lady called Tracy Redding, a woman with a wonderful voice, and has gone on and has a good name around Perth and works well on that situation. In the meantime, Sue Downey had moved to Perth. Remember Sue, I'd worked with her with La Teba down in Katanning. And also she used to sit in occasionally with Instant Replay with Barry and Joe and her husband Steve and Kingsley and myself. So we got Sue in. And we put a band together called 3 in a Cell. Now, that name was taken from the Peddlers album, 3 in a Cell. And again, there was absolutely no way in the world we could play anything like the Peddlers did. I mean, they were amazing. But it was a nice little thing from a point of view. There were 3 of us. We're in a situation whereby we were stuck together when we were playing. It's if you like, in a cellular type situation. And that was the birth of 3 in a Cell. Now, again, Gil came from a background of vaudeville. He was in a German band, a German trio, playing that sort of stuff, polkas and all that sort of stuff. And I'd come from the old-time dance side of things. So we basically became a cabaret unit. And we got a fair bit of work doing that sort of thing, and, of course, trying to get yourself established is always a problem. So, again, you sort of try and think outside the box, and I got in touch with a whole heap of bowling clubs and that sort of thing and said, hey, listen, how would you like to get yourself put together an evening of music? It's not going to cost you a thing. All you got to do is charge $10 on the door. You supply the food and all the rest of it. You pay us $5 a head, and you keep the rest of the money. And we thought, right, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, if we get $100, well, that would be amazing. So, as it turned out, we were picking up somewhere between $140, $150, $200 a night doing this. And so we were basically, entrepreneuring our own gigs. Over time, that also ran out, and then Sue went for an extended period to England, I think it was. While she was away, we picked up a gig, and a lady that I had been dealing with at work, a lady called Connie Kiss Anderson, was one of our customers, one of our clients, and she was a singer, and she was a rock chick, a real rock chick. She was also very, very professional with what she did, and she came down to Narrogin with us to do a gig in Narrogin, and the preparation that she put in for that one gig just blew my mind. It really did. And so Gil and I, we had a chat, and we thought about it. We thought, oh, okay, what do you reckon? So on my 50th birthday in 1997, we played our first gig as Kis'n'Tel. Connie went on, was also an aspiring songwriter at that point in time. She had American contacts. She was married to an American guy, and the horizontal cowboy, she calls him. And we supported her as best we could. If she had one of her original songs, well, we were more than happy to play one of those, or to play them at all. Actually, we were quite happy about that. But essentially, she was a rock chick. Gil and Connie and I, we had residencies at Franklin's Inn, Victoria Park, and we also had a lot of other places we played at as well around Perth. And we gained a little, quite a reasonable little following around the place as well. And then Gil decided to retire. So he left, and a guy called Carl Redlick came in. Now, Carl was a totally different cat altogether. Carl was a rock and roll guitarist. We'd been getting by with Gil with his saxophone and his guitar work and his vocal work. And he and Connie blended really, really well as singers. Carl came in. Carl had a rougher sort of voice. He had a real aggressive guitar style, and he decided that he wanted to turn us into a pub band, a proper pub band, so to speak. So that happened for about another 12 or 18 months, something like that, and then I left the band. In the meantime, I'd been at work at Park Pianos, and this tall, grey-haired guy walked into the shop, and he said, "Can I speak to Laurie?" And I said, "Yep, that's me." And he says, "G'day." He said, "My name's Paddy." And I said, "I've got a dog by the name of Paddy. You've got the same coloured hair as you." That was our first exchange, basically. And it turned out, at the time, I'd been looking to put together a blues band. I wanted to put an actual live band together, as well as working in a duo type situation or a trio type situation, sequenced. And I wanted to start working with a live drummer again and live bass players and all that sort of thing. So I've been thinking about this, and Paddy came in, and he was moving out of a band that he'd been playing with for a number of years. And he was also wanting to put this blues band together. So we got to and collaborated, and we put together the Paul Hammond Bluesmakers. Paul from Les Paul guitar, which is what he played, Hammond from the Hammond organ aspect of it, which is what I was playing, and Bluesmakers, a take on John Mayall's Bluesbreakers name. And over a period of time, it started with Paddy, myself, Roy Skinner. There were 2 or 3 drummers and bass players came and tried out with us before we actually settled on a lineup. And Trevor Judd and Kevin King came as a pair. Kevin as a bass player and Trevor as a drummer. And we played together for probably in that lineup, probably for about 12 months, something like that. And then Trevor decided he was leaving, and Kevin went with him. So now we had no drummer and no bass player. As it turned out, Roy Skinner was also a bass player. I think I left out. I did. Deborah Lee was our female vocalist at the time, and when we got that lineup together, we now had to find a drummer. There was a young guy called Mike Johansson. He was a Swede, and he came in, and his drum teacher used to come into the shop, and he mentioned Mike to me as he said, this guy should be your drummer if you like. And I thought, that sounds like a good idea. So Mike came along, and he was very good. Over a period of time, Deborah decided to leave the band, and then Paddy moved to Bridgetown. So we lost a co-founder. I now had to think about how we did things. And my nephew, Brad Johnson, had come to town from Albany, and he was a guitarist, but he found he had a knack for playing the drums as well. So I said to him, hey, we've filled the drummer's chair, but would you be interested in coming in as a guitarist? Yeah, no, I'll have a crack at that, he said. So he replaced Paddy, and the lineup really worked extremely well until Mike decided that he had a family situation back in Sweden and he needed to go back home again. So he packed up his family and he left, and now we were left without a drummer, and we thought, well, okay, Brad, do you want to go on the drums, and we'll find another guitarist? And about that time, we decided, maybe we'll give this exercise away. Gil Oswald, in the meantime, used to sit in as a sax player for us from time to time, and when we did do any recording or whatever it was, Gil was there to help out with that. So it was around about that point in time where the Kis'n'Tel breakup happened as well, where I left there, and then the ongoing from that was that about 12 months down the line, Connie came to me and said, look, Carl is moving back to Melbourne. You know anyone who might be able, who might be interested? And I immediately thought of Brad. He was young. He was in his early 20s, and he was keen to learn. There was nobody better to learn from than Connie, because she was the ultimate professional. She knew the music industry inside out. She worked it well. She had her own business in the music industry. And he was also someone who would be more than happy to work with her with her songwriting. And this had been a bit of a bone of contention, I understand, with Carl and Connie. So he said, yep, no, I'm happy. So they got together, they tried it out, and they worked together for 5 years, again, as Kis'n'Tel, maintaining the original name, which was one that I put together to make sure that Connie never left the band. At that point in time, I was now not playing, and I had 3 sisters who worked under a couple of different names, and one of those sisters was Karen Rudge. She was working under a married name back in those days, but Karen used to come to me because I was doing backing tracks for people, and I would prepare them, and I would get them in and set them up for them so they could actually use them as backing tracks behind themselves. And Karen and I had been working together for probably 2 or 3 years at this point in time. She would come around and we would sit down and go through her stuff and put her music together for her. And they were looking for someone to run their desk for them while they were playing. So these 3 sisters blended extremely well from the point of view that they, one played bass, one played guitar, and Karen was a sax player, clarinet player, and the 3 of them, their voices, Andrew's sisters type stuff, no problems at all. The harmonies were amazing. So Karen asked me if I'd be interested in doing their sound for them. And I said, well, I've got a basic idea of what I'm doing, but yeah, look, I'll have a crack at it. They were having problems with feedback and all sorts of things. And it turned out that their previous sound guy had, to solve it, he'd bought this piece of gear and he'd bought that piece of gear and the graphic equalizers and this and that. And I just looked at the desk and I thought, right, okay, no, we're going to do away with all that, turn all that off and just go back to the absolute basics. Now, I don't know whether they were blowing smoke up my backside or not, but after we did our first gig with me on the desk, I got the comment back that is the best these guys have ever sounded. And I thought, this is crazy. I really didn't know what I was doing. And all I was doing was tweaking a sound, walking around the room, listening to what it sounded like here, what it sounded like over there. No, okay, we can do something with that, and just basically tweaking the mixing board. And that was all we did. That was all we ever did in the time that I worked with them. And with that group, we did an awful lot of stuff for a lot of corporate type stuff for the Rally Australia, which was in Perth at the time. We did gigs for those people as well. Eventually, they decided to fold up their trio idea. There were 4 sisters, and they would rotate between them as a trio. And Karen came to me and she says, look, Jane and I are just going to work as a duo, and we want to downsize everything and get back to a point whereby we just have the 2 of us playing and without all the necessary gear. And I said, yep, no, that sounds okay. So we got them into a small PA system. I showed them how to set it up, and that basically put me out of a job there at that point in time, but that didn't worry me over much. It didn't take a great deal of time, probably 12 or 18 months later, and Karen said to me, look, she said, would you be interested in forming a duo with me? And I said, yeah. I've been waiting for years for this to happen. Karen and I, by this point in time, have been working together for probably 10 years, something like that. So that's what we did. We set up this duo. We had a residency at the Narrogin Inn in Armadale. We'd organised to play for the Chocolate Factory out in Swanview for every Sunday afternoon for 3 hours. So we had these regular gigs, and then we got the Saturday night gigs that turned up as well. And every now and again we'd get a Sunday night gig as well. So it was nothing for us to be playing 4 nights a weekend, just as this duo. And that worked well until 2007, when Karen, at that point in time, decided that she wanted to take a rest from playing music, which is fair enough because she'd been at it for years and years and years. And in that period of time, I'd also been acting as the roadie for the 2 of us. And a roadie for 2, that doesn't sound all that bad, except for the fact that I was playing keyboards, and I had 2 keyboards that I was using. One was a synth, and one was a Hammond stage keyboard. I was using a Leslie speaker. We had the PA system, and we had all of that gear. And then also we had Karen's gear, which was saxophone case, and a clarinet case, and a case and a computer, and that was basically it. But we'd had a really good run of it at that point in time. So I decided, I'm going to take a break from this as well. So really 2007 was the end of my music career in Perth. I then, in 2010, moved back to Albany. I had, in 2008 at least, I had decided to retire. I was only 61 at the time. I didn't have the money to retire, but who worries about that? I had dreams of travelling, and I had an awful lot of people that I'd been to school with and people I'd grown up with who were no longer with us at that age. And I thought, life is not guaranteed. So it was that point in time where basically this business as a filmmaker virtually started. I mean, I had been making videos for years before that, because of the fact I got into the video industry when it first came out in Australia. So I had retired. I sold my house because I wanted to travel, which meant I needed to maybe have a caravan. Well, I had a caravan. I couldn't afford to have a house and pay for a caravan as well. So I sold the house. I bought the caravan, paid out the mortgage, because I was going to still be working now if I kept the mortgage on. Paid out the mortgage, and then I had enough money left over to go with the superannuation, which I could claim apparently at about that time, to keep living until such time as the pension came on at age 65, as it was back in those days. And 2009, I did the first 2 trips that I could with a caravan, and in 2010, I drove over east and did my first lap of Australia back at that time. Came back to Albany in 2010 and started looking after Mum, who'd moved down to Albany from Perth. And essentially over the next 8 years, I became her carer. She didn't need full-time care at that point in time, but that allowed me to continue to do things such as the Gib River Road trip. And in 2013, we did the Savannah Way video series. We'd done the Gib River series in that time. Did I say Gib River before? Dampier Peninsula. And in 2012, I also had a hip replacement. Around about 2015, I dragged out my old Hammond keyboard, and it was heavy, but I dragged it across to Leslie across to Bridgetown, where I had some mates over there who were playing, and I dragged it over there and started playing some blues with them. We were just in the background having a mess around. It was a jam type session thing, and then came the 2016, I think it was, Blues Festival over there, and I played there with a group called the Swing Daddies. Now, the Swing Daddies were a highly organised, well-rehearsed band. Right. Highly organised, highly rehearsed. You remember that when I was first looking for a player in Perth, and John Reid became a partner, there was a guy called Mike Stone came along, and I don't. So I sing, but I don't play lead guitar. Well, Mike, in actual fact, could play lead guitar, but he just didn't have the confidence in himself to do it. He was a good lead guitarist, but he was also a bloody good frontman. And he'd put together this group called the Swing Daddies. Now, the Swing Daddies, as I said, highly organised, well-rehearsed. So come the Blues Festival, there was the bass player came in from Manjimup, guitarist flew in from Dalesford in Victoria. I came across from Albany. We had a couple of guys come down from Perth, and Gil came along as well on sax. He and Mike Stone are brothers-in-law. And this highly organised, well-rehearsed band, the first time we actually saw each other was when we walked on stage with sound check at the blues thing. So we sat down, and Mike had this rather interesting way of introducing the songs. Didn't have a clue what the song name was. All of this stuff was 3-chord stuff, as you do. And Mike could stand here and say, right, shuffle beat in E. So you'd start. Didn't know what we were playing. We'd go with the groove, we'd go with the feel. Okay, we'll have a fast swing beat in A, or in whatever key it was. That was what he called out, and we just played. One night that played, we did the Friday night and we did the Saturday night. We had the last shift on the Saturday night at the Freemasons in Bridgetown, and we were playing from 10 till 12. And there'd been some damn good acts on before us. They really had, and I thought, this is going to be funny. We'll clear the place out in no time. Well, by the time we'd been playing for probably less than 3/4 of an hour, there was a line out the door and people outside waiting to get in. And that was the way it went for the night. So the Swing Daddies was a great experience. Again, it was all improvisational, and it was just good stuff. So that got me going, and I wound up buying myself a new Hammond keyboard, and I bought myself a new pedal which replaced the Leslie speaker, a thing called a ventilator pedal, and downsized everything to the point where, it was all quite manageable, because I'm starting to get on a bit at this point in time. And Mike, I think I was the second youngest in the band. And the last gig we did in 2017, I was 70, Mike was 73 or 74 or something or other. And then the rest of the band were between me and him, and the youngest player, I think, was 67 or 68, something like that. 2017, I get back home to Albany. I started going out to the King River Tavern. They had a jam session on, and I was starting to get the itch to play again at this point in time. So I'd go out there, and then there was a group out there. They called themselves River Crew. But the band River Crew as such was still pretty loose at that point in time. They were working on country music, it seems. And we talked about it, but I never got the invite to actually join the band. But we did get together and rehearse stuff that was more rocky type stuff and that sort of thing. And over a period of 12 months, we called ourselves Bedrock. And that was John Berry was the singer. He was also a drummer. Steve Wellman was the guitar player. There was Eric Harris, who was an excellent singer and guitarist. Nathan Floyd was a real steady bass player. He was good. And then, because John didn't particularly want to play the drums, we had 2 or 3 or 4 different drummers come in, and they came and drifted. And then there was a young guy that I got onto, a guy called Connor Boardley. And Connor used to play on an electric kit at home. And Connor, again, was only a 16-year-old or something at the time, or 17. He didn't drive. So I had a chat with him, and I said, look, mate, would you be interested in coming and trying out? So we got him out there, and Connor was the timekeeper. He was really good. And so for the next period of time, Connor was our drummer, and John would free John Berry up to just looking after the vocal work, and that was it. And then John decided to go to Perth. At that point in time, the whole thing sort of fell apart because John was the organiser. It was at that time that I received a phone call from a guy called Lee Barsby. Now, Lee was a bass player. I'd cheekily put my name and phone number in an internet band pickup place, I suppose you could call it. And he'd rung the number and he said, hey, look, he said, I've got this trio. We've got a guitarist, but he's coming and going. He's not there a lot of the time. And I've got a female singer by the name of Whitney Weaver. I said, yeah, no, fair enough. I'll come around. We'll have a run through and see how it goes. Well, as it turned out, with the experience I had by this point in time, they could throw the charts at me and I could play them. And it all just locked together. So for the next couple of years, there was Lee and Whitney and myself, and we did a lot of gigs and things around Albany, playing the Rock and Roll Club, the Country Music Club, and private shows, and up at the Grapes and Gallops, up at the horse racing in Mount Barker. So Studio Crew ran for that period of time, and then I decided that it was time for me to travel again. So, and I said, look, guys, I'm going to be heading off for 12 months or thereabouts. I'm going to be going away, and I'm not sure what they did at that point in time, but I think Lee got the odd player in and that sort of thing, and I hit the road, and I eventually got back, and Lee had got himself in a situation whereby he had organised, taken on a country music gig. And I'd been organising all the music. I'd been doing all the arrangements, all the backings and that sort of thing. And I said to Lee, look, mate, look, when I get back, I'll help you out with it, no problems at all. So I got back and we did that. At the end of the year, I set all the gear up and we played. And at the end of the night, I mean, I was all keen to go, the whole deal. At the end of the night, of course, then you've got to pack up, pack everything away, take it home, unpack it, put it away. And I was stuffed. I was just totally stuffed. And I thought, wow, okay, righto. I needed to do this gig to remind me why I didn't want to do it anymore. And at that point in time, I retired from active playing. So then the Papa Bear Quintet was born. Now, Quintet is 5 musos. There's 3 of us. Papa Bear is Lee Barsby. Papa Bear is Graham Ayres. pet name for him. Graham Ayres was a singer, guitarist, and had worked in one of Albany's leading rock bands in his time. And I came into it, we sat down, and just for the hell of it, I called it the Papa Bear Quintet. Lee was the guy who organised it, ran it, and at this point in time, Lee was organising the music. So for the first time probably since I was 15, I wasn't organising the music. I was just turning up and playing. All the rest of the time, I'd been the guy who'd been running the band, organising the band, all that sort of thing. To this day now, the Papa Bear Quintet, everything's always set up. We just walk in, sit down and play, and it's just once every 2 or 3 weeks, and we have a heap of music we go through, and occasionally we'll pick up something new and we'll have a crack at that, just have a lot of fun. So that was the history, or my history. Then I look on Facebook, and this book, remember, earlier in the piece, I'd received a phone call from a guy who is compiling a book about bands and music in the Great Southern. The book has finally been released, and it's not a small book. It's a big book. It's 800 pages, and it covers 560 bands. God knows how many musicians in that period of time, all named where possible. He'd done 160 interviews. Now, I know how much work goes into organising organising anything when you're trying to put something together. I mean, I'd done it for some of the road trips that I'd done, the Gib River Road, preparing for that. Was the Savannah Way, which we had a lot of places to go to and a lot of places to research and get the information before we did the trip, so we knew where we were going and what we were doing. The other one was the one along the railway line. So the initial thing along the railway line was just a matter of, and I'm talking about the Trans-Australia Railway line, crossroads we were not supposed to be on. But I had sat down and I had researched that pretty thoroughly before we did it. So I know how much work had gone in, and none of that took anywhere near as much work as what Kevin would have had to do with this particular book to research and put this thing together. And he's not a writer. So he's compiled this whole thing and has done an amazing job. And it's inspired this little video talking about my own life in music. So I hope it's been of some interest. So we'll see where we go from here. If you like the sort of stuff I'm doing, the old story, like, subscribe, share. That's the best way to get to get my stuff out there is for you, if you like something, to share it with your friends and your mates. Tell them about us, and we'll see where we go from there. So meanwhile, thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure. Yeah. If you enjoyed this video, you might like to check out this video. Or maybe browse this playlist. There are over 900 videos just like these on this channel. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, and we'll let you know when the next video is available. If you liked this video, hit the like button, comment, and feel free to share with your friends. Thanks for watching.